This video was made possible by the Laurel Foundation, Bay Area Lyme Foundation, and the Limelight Foundation.
My name's Camille, and I'm 52, and I'm a mother and a wife, and my husband and all three of my daughters have Lyme disease. My husband was diagnosed about 6 years ago. My daughter Bronte was diagnosed about 5 years ago. My daughter Isabel was diagnosed about 7 years ago. I was diagnosed this past year along with my youngest daughter, who's 10. Bronte is 21 years old. She was born sick. It took us about 15 years to discover she had Lyme. Once we found out she had it, she did treatment. She missed months of school, but after a few years of being on treatment, she did remarkably well. She got into college, went the first year, had a relapse, had to come home from college for a semester, and I'm happy to say now she, so far, is off treatment and doing remarkably well. Isabel is my middle daughter. She started showing symptoms in 5th grade. She's 18 now. We had lots of misdiagnosis, and if it weren't for her, I really believe we probably wouldn't have found out that our whole family has it. She was diagnosed in 6th grade. She's 18 now. She's still really sick, and she's been sick for 8 years. She had to be home hospital for years. She couldn't go to high school. She went just part of the time. She was able to graduate on time, got into all of her colleges having 3 to 5 seizures a day. She's had years of IVs, and 2 years ago started having seizures. And then after graduation, this is just a couple weeks ago, she started hallucinations. So she had to have her PICC line put back in. My youngest, Abby's 10, and she was the healthiest when she was born. And I believe that with Lyme, symptoms for kids usually start to come out pre-puberty. And that was about the same time Bronte and Isabel started showing symptoms, but we didn't know back then. Abby missed a lot of school this year. We had her tested, and we got the call in January that she has it. I had a healthy pregnancy. Everything went great, well. And our oldest daughter was born, Bronte, she's 21 now. Came out screaming and didn't stop. A nurse at the hospital said, "I've never seen anything like this." They ran some blood work on her and said she had some sort of infection. And she was given shots of antibiotics. She still was very restless at the hospital, and so the doctors were concerned, but they ran tests and said she should be fine. From the minute she was born, she would have moments of smiling like babies, but screaming 6 to 10 hours a day for over 2 years. So my husband and I were in the doctor's office sometimes every week for the first 2 years of her life. The doctor said, "This is probably the worst case of colic I've ever seen." So we were seeing specialists after specialists, and as a new mother, I was looking everything up. How long does colic last? I think they said 3 to 6 months. Swaddle them, give them the colic drops. We did everything. And this was not just a couple hours every day. This was 6 to 8 hours every day. We started saying to our doctor, "This is more than colic." And he said, I still think this is just a really severe case of colic." I'll never forget, on her first birthday, my husband took the day off for work and we were going to take her to the zoo. And she just turned 1, and she kind of fell over on her stomach, pulling her legs up, screaming. And so we brought her into the doctor, and there was another doctor there. She started doing a stomach exam, and my daughter, Bronte, passed out in front of her. And she said, "That looked to me like this was a seizure." So we had to see a neurologist. We did the brain study, and the doctor after that said, "Even though I don't see any seizure activity, I'm still very concerned. There is something wrong. I don't know what it is." So from then, we went to allergists, trying to rule out food allergies, and all throughout elementary school, she started developing, as one doctor stated, one of the worst cases of anxiety she'd ever seen, and then learning disabilities, and it took us till she was 15 to find out that she had Lyme. My husband, about 11 years ago, started feeling very weak on one side and falling. He would just walk down our hallway and fall. So we went through a full year of misdiagnosed. They thought he had all different things, and finally diagnosed him with ALS. Went to the ALS clinic, and after the testing, they diagnosed him with PLS. And at that time, my middle daughter got diagnosed with Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue, and a couple people came to me and said, there's no way, you're talking about very different serious illnesses, that these can't be related. Two of my friends came to me and said, have you ever heard of Lyme disease? And I said, yeah, the back east, Lyme, Connecticut. And they said, yeah, but it's everywhere. One of my friends said she had met this man that was also diagnosed with ALS. Turns out he had Lyme. Fortunately, we were able to meet him in the hospital. And he told us his beliefs on Lyme, and we started connecting dots, thinking, oh my God, could this be what our whole family has? And at first, I understand why doctors have a hard time because there's not proof yet of certain things. But when you're in my shoes, I'm one person, and my whole family is sick. And I feel like I'm trying to be honest, sharing all their symptoms and being told, no, this is what this daughter has, this is what your husband has. And in my gut, I knew that they were wrong, that this had to be something that we all had together. And I'm so thankful for our pediatrician because at first she said, Camille, I don't know. The medical community doesn't get trained that much about Lyme. But then she took the time to listen to us, and she saw each of my daughters. And my husband would come into visits. She said, I've never seen anything like this. And she said, I want you to know that I'm behind you. And that was life-changing. My pediatrician said, you know, Camille, I'm going to do some blood work on Isabel. And she called me and said, there is a marker in Isabel's testing for Lyme. And then she said, have you been out of the country? And I said, no. And she said, it's very strange. Your daughter has a very unusual parasite. I don't know what all this is, but I see your family, and I've been watching you guys for years, and I've never seen anything like this. Why don't you go get more blood work? I found a Lyme literate doctor, which was like a hallelujah moment. And I'll be the first to admit it. When someone said Lyme disease, I kind of looked at them, and my initial reaction was a back east disease. The Lyme literate doctor told me, yes, your daughter has Lyme, but she also has candida. She has parasites. We can't even treat her for the Lyme until we treat her for all these other things. The Lyme literate doctor started to ask very impertinent questions about the history of our family. And I'll never forget one of Isabel's appointments. You know, the poor Lyme doctors, because they're still learning. The world is still learning about this disease. And I'm a mother, so I'm wanting answers. I want my daughter well. I knew she was so sick. And our doctor's looking at us, and my husband walks in. At the time, my husband's very weak. He's got his 2 canes. And the doctor looked up and said, what's going on with you? And then he said, how many more kids do you have? And then we started talking about Bronte. The doctor right there and then said, you know, we're learning a lot. And I think it's fascinating that you were diagnosed with this and that you're telling us that your other daughter was born sick and you've been dealing with things with her for 15 years. I think you guys need to all get tested. Our doctor did so many tests on my husband. There was a urine challenge. There was one where he had to do massive antibiotics, and everything was inconclusive. And again, I admire my Lyme doctor so much because he just said, Scott, I look at your family and you're testing inconclusive. You've probably had this for a long time. I say we just try you on treatment. And thank goodness that he did. Because my husband, at that point, falling so much, breaking ribs. He fell in our garage, 5 teeth coming out. He looked like he had ALS or PLS, and this close to being in a wheelchair. Then I thought, yay, we're gonna do the Lyme treatment. And little did I know what that would entail. I didn't know that Lyme causes so many different things. You start seeing other people come in, and you see some are on PICC lines, some are on ports. What I like about our clinic is that they had a naturopath there, our main doctor, and then another doctor. I would go to one appointment thinking, okay, whatever this doctor tells me is going to be the same for Bronte, Isabel, and Scott. What I started learning is that each case is so complicated. As a mom, I still feel this is the hardest thing about Lyme and being a caretaker, is that you're always told when you have children, if you don't have to put them in antibiotics, don't. The craziest thing is in our house, it literally looked like you're in a pharmacy. And so I would go to one appointment thinking, okay, whatever this doctor tells me is going to be the same for Bronte, Isabel, and Scott. And then you're watching your middle daughter and you think she's going to die. And we tried all different things. We met with the naturopath doctor. It did seem like for Isabel that a PICC line and the hours of IVs a day was the best for her. And our doctor was very honest. He said, Camille, you got to be very brave in this. Do not succumb to it because it will eat you alive. You just focus on taking care of your family. It's going to be different for each person. And this was the hardest part here because my middle daughter again and my husband were so sick. He said it's only going to get worse before it gets better. Once you get the antibiotics in them, it's going to wake up the bugs. My daughter was suffering so bad. I think deep down she wanted to die. I didn't tell her that. I just said the treatment's going to be rough and the antibiotics and the supplements are going to create things in your body that are going to cause more symptoms. Isabel probably started first, and then Scott, and then Bronte. All treatments were different. And Isabel at that point was so sick. She was bedridden, kind of lifeless on the couch, just telling me, I can't do this, Mom. It's so painful. She would be almost howling like a wounded animal, telling me that she felt like she was being stabbed everywhere and hot oil was being poured down her throat. And after 6 months to a year, at one point, because she's so strong, she just said, I can't do this. I'm in so much pain. I feel like someone's peeling my skin. We would do Epsom salt baths. We would do everything. My husband would bring his IVs to work. I have a picture of him in his office, 6 hours a day on his IV. The most joyful, loving, easygoing guy, never complains. And throughout this, has rarely ever complained. I would come home in the beginning of his treatment from school. He would be on a PICC line, and I would say, where's Daddy? And they'd say, he's not feeling good, he's in the bedroom. And I'd open the door, all the blinds were shut. He could barely open his eyes. He said, I'm in so much pain, Camille, I can't even talk. I remember so many times at night when I would have Isabel on an IV, Scott on an IV, Bronte's doing orals. They all have different drops. And there was a couple nights where I have them all on the couch, and they all told me that they thought they were going to die because they were in so much pain. Fortunately, my daughter Bronte, after a couple years, got through her treatment, and she's doing remarkably well. And my husband works every day. He did an experimental treatment last May, and although he's still handicapped, he has not been on any treatment since. I think one of the neatest things about our doctor is almost from day one, he talks about how you have to tackle this disease, you have to have an open mind. And there are some really interesting things our family's done, and we did this magnetic testing over the body. And our doctor said, I find if you cannot be open-minded, you're going to shut a lot of doors. And my husband got a name of this great acupuncturist. That was amazing. And I liked that our Lyme doctor said, by all means, this is something you want to do. It looks like you are getting, a little stronger with this. Do it. I started doing a lot of research, and Qigong was presented at our club. And I talked to the teacher that worked there, and she had told me how sick she was as a child and how she believes that Qigong healed her. It's very slow movement. It could be very spiritual for people, and she believes it opens you up. Well, the minute I heard the word opens you up, a light bulb went on for me for Isabel. That for some reason it looked like Scott's and Bronte's body accepted the antibiotics, and for Isabel it seemed like it worked a period of time, but she was getting bloated, and I kept thinking something seems blocked in her. Of course, she didn't want to go with me because a lot of elderly people do the Qigong. She did it a few times, and she said, Mom, I'm the only teenager in there, but I'm actually feeling better. She got something from that. And we were super excited, and then her seizure started. So with Lyme, you have to be on all the time. If this doesn't work, then you got to find something else. AR testing. So we started doing that. They take the medicine that you're taking and take some crystals, and they put it over your body. And if you're just an outsider, you're going to think this is crazy. Well, when you're fighting for your kid's life, you're going to be open-minded. I think one of the hardest things as a caretaker, when you are dealing with multiple symptoms of a chronic illness, is that you're one person and everyone's needs are different. My husband is handicapped. I had to deal with that. He used to be this big athlete. He still has 2 canes. His body became so weak. For my daughter Bronte, there were a few months that she just couldn't exercise, and that's when she was at her worst. For my daughter Isabel, we have tried everything. And the hardest part about her case is she would start doing Qigong. All of a sudden her seizures started. 3 to 5 seizures a day. It's very hard when you're having that many seizures to bring her anywhere, because she could have a seizure. If I'm not looking, she could fall and hit her head. When she didn't have a PICC line, she would do her best to swim, but she would be absolutely exhausted. So you have to use every resource you can. It's been extremely complicated. My middle daughter was told, you can't have wheat or dairy. I think in 2 weeks, she lost over 10 pounds. She was traumatized because back then, everything wasn't gluten-free. And I remember going in the supermarket and spending hours talking to a person that worked there saying, there's just not enough gluten-free products right now. And the exhaustion of coming home and feeling responsible, I've got to make my daughter a nutritious meal that she likes. During that 1.5 years, I think, before gluten-free started becoming more popular, she just kept losing weight because nothing sounded good. And then on top of that, she has to take these antibiotics where you're supposed to have a full stomach. That was a nightmare. The first, I want to say, year, because we were in such chronic stages, honestly was unbearable. Our family, our faith has helped us. There is no way I would have been able to do what I was able to do if it weren't for family and friends, people bringing meals. As a caretaker for that many people, you're managing symptoms that are all over the board. One day, your family member is literally asking you, am I going to die? I'm not a doctor. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. You have to stay very strong, and besides very strong, you have to be very real. When you feel good, because you do, you get through the years and you start feeling like we're actually getting our life back. My husband doesn't have to do 6 hours of an IV. He only has to do 3 hours. So you start sharing. This has been the positive for our family. Because one thing I don't like about Lyme is in the beginning, for a long time, we were made to be felt like we were a crazy family. And you have no idea how hard that was. There was someone that asked one of my friends, when we didn't know we had Lyme, are the Atherns good at washing their hands? As a mother, I take that very personal. I think there was a year where I didn't leave our house very much, but then you start to get your life a little bit back, and you try to be as honest as you can, because people would look at my oldest daughter. She's always looked healthy. People will look at her and say, oh, she looks like a model. She's fine, Camille. And this is when she had missed 4 or 5 months her junior year, and she's barely getting out of bed. This disease is so invisible and so shameful and so unfair. You get to a point where I would look in the mirror and I would look so tired and pale that I wouldn't even recognize myself. Our Lyme doctor definitely said, Camille, you have to make it a priority to eat healthy and take care of yourself. And I looked at him and started crying, and I said, how? My family is dying. But you have to as a caretaker, because everyone's relying on you. My girls came to me and they were hysterical. And I was trying to be strong for them, and they said, Mom, what would happen if you died? And that was a turning point for me. My youngest daughter couldn't go to school on her own, so I had to go with her every day and stay in the class in the morning. And she told her teacher, I don't want my mom to die, because who would take care of me? You never want to feel like you're being selfish. I struggle with that. If I ever take care of myself in the littlest way, if I go for a run, I feel guilty. And I'm working on that, because I know I have to be healthy. I have to feel somewhat happy in our circumstance, and you can. In a horrible circumstance, it's hard to believe, but you have to find joy. Because if you don't, then it affects everyone around you. You have to find joy somehow. There's so many mixed blessings. And when you've been through the chronicness, the despair, and the pain of this disease, you hold on to every single blessing. Every single blessing. I don't care what it is. It could be the most simple thing. I have a husband that was diagnosed with a death sentence. He is alive. He got on Lyme treatment. He works every day. He is joyful. He's handicapped. He makes the most of it. He's a miracle. He shouldn't either be here or he should be in a wheelchair, and he's not. So I embrace that. I have an older daughter that was born sick, went through so much growing up. She is at college. She is the most empathetic, artistic, loving human being because of what she's been through. You want to embrace all that. You want to be so joyful, but I still have my Isabel. And although it was horrible to watch Isabel miss literally most of her childhood, she graduated on time and got into every single college she applied to with scholarships. But unfortunately, we thought she was making a turning point. And then about 12 days ago, she started hallucinating. So that's hard. I think the biggest gift of my family is the love that we have for each other. And I know that sounds corny, but our family, we don't take anything for granted.